In this video, I'll be offering you my review of the new 7Artisans 10mm f2.8 autofocus lens. Hi everyone and welcome back. In this video I'll be sharing my thoughts on an ultra-wide autofocus lens from 7Artisans, the 10mm f2.8 for APS-C cameras. Now I'm testing the Fujifilm X mount version, but there is an E mount version available, and 7Artisans have told me that there is a Z mount coming as well. The usual disclaimer, of course, applies here. 7Artisans did send this lens over for testing, and I do get to keep it. Now, they've had no other input on this review, but I have provided them with some feedback during my testing to improve the firmware of the lens before release, so that we can all benefit from a better product hitting the market. However, they will be watching this review for the first time with you guys here as it goes live, so rest assured, all findings here are my own and haven't been influenced by 7Artisans at all. So let's get into it. The build of this lens, much like others around this price bracket, is metal and glass and feels very, very good in the hand. It has no physical aperture ring, which is a bit of a shame, but when it comes to wide-angle lenses, I personally don't find myself switching the aperture all that often anyway, so it's not a big deal for me. Let me know what you think in the comments below. There are two controls on the lens barrel though. One is a very large, well-dampened manual focus ring, for those who still like to manual focus on focus-by-wire lenses, and on the side of the barrel is an AF/MF switch. Now, I've knocked this a couple of times and wondered why my camera wasn't focusing, so honestly, I'd rather it not be there on an X-mount lens. There's really no need for it on most Fujifilm cameras. What I do appreciate about the physical design of this lens though is that, while not being fully weather sealed, it does have a rubber gasket on the mount in order to help protect the expensive camera that it's attached to. Now, the hood and included lens caps are middling in quality at best. The caps don't seem to really attach very securely, and I've been replacing them with my spare Fujifilm ones in the field because those actually stay on the lens. The hood has just been a little bit tough to get on and off, and it's not all that useful, so I've been leaving it at home anyway. Aside from that though, there's nothing really to write home about. It's a well-built lens for the price point, but the accessories could use a little work. Autofocus on this lens is driven by a stepping motor, and it's definitely fit for purpose. It's not the fastest lens I've tested around this focal length. That accolade still goes to the Tamron 11 to 20mm in my experience, but it's just fine for an ultra-wide lens that's not likely to be used in fast-moving situations anyway. Now, during my testing, I did test both the initial firmware and an update provided by 7Artisans, and when I first received the lens, it was struggling to even focus in simple situations at times. It would slow down quite a bit and sometimes outright refuse to focus. I also had a lot of missed focus during that time. Now, thankfully, this was improved greatly through the firmware that I received. On the current firmware, the lens focuses much more confidently, and I've seen far fewer missed frames. It's still not 100% perfect though, and I hope that we can see another update from 7Artisans after the release. Sharpness is reasonably good in the center of the frame from f2.8, and it improves quite a bit as the lens is stopped down. At f5.6 and f8, it's very good in the center of the frame. The corners, on the other hand, are quite smeared and mushy wide open. As we stop down though, they do get much better and are completely usable by f5.6, even out to the extreme corners of the image. And once you're actually working with this lens out in the field and not shooting brick walls though, this level of sharpness is perfectly acceptable. Now, if we completely zoom out on this sharpness test image, you can also see that there's a bit of barrel distortion present in this lens. Now, if you're shooting architecture for a living, this is probably not your lens. But for casual landscape photographers and just general hobbyists, this is likely fine, and you'll never notice it in real-world shooting. Longitudinal chromatic aberration is off the charts, as you can see here, but thankfully with the inherent depth of field we have and the sort of working distances we use with this lens, you're never really going to see that in the real world unless you're testing for it like I am here. However, there is a little lateral chromatic aberration visible in extreme situations as well, and again, that can be easily corrected for in post, so it's not something to worry about. I noticed a bit of coma at f2.8 when shooting lights at night, but once the lens was stopped down, even to f4, it disappeared quickly. There's a fairly deep vignette when the lens is used wide open, but it clears up nicely from f4, and by f5.6 and onwards, images are evenly illuminated from corner to corner. Now, if you're getting close enough, you can still produce a little shallow depth of field with this lens, but its minimum focus distance is 30 centimeters, so you're not going to be seeing bokeh all that often. When it is possible though, it is what it is. It's nothing special, and I wouldn't be buying this lens to get in close and use it for shallow depth of field, but it's there if your heart desires it. Flare and ghosting are actually reasonably well controlled with this lens when you have the sun in the frame. Images remain fairly clean and aberration free. When the sun is right at the edge of the frame though, all hell breaks loose and we get effects like this. Personally, I don't mind this from time to time, and it's easy enough to get rid of by just slightly changing the composition or the angle that you're shooting at to make sure that the sun is not in that particular position, so it's nothing that I would be too concerned about. Sunstars are possible to create with this lens, but they're average in size and shape and don't really call attention to themselves. For those who love a sunstar-driven image, this may not be the lens for you, but this is honestly the way that I like my sunstars to render. Basically simple and non-distracting. Now on to what this lens is actually like to use. You've seen some pixel peeping and some review-style dissection of this lens, but how does it actually fare in the field? Well, let's start with the build. It's small and light enough that you barely notice it in your bag, which is great for a lens like this. On top of that, it's got that rubber gasket around the mount, so I feel a little better using it out in the rain or on the beach, for example. Now, one situation that I would never use a lens without a rubber gasket in would be when shooting a waterfall like this one. On this particular day, the wind was blowing quite hard, as you can hopefully see from this sequence of images. So I would have been constantly worried about getting water in between the lens and the camera body without that extra layer of protection from that rubber gasket. The X-T5 I was working on costs about 9 times what this lens does, and I'd rather not replace it for a simple image of a waterfall. When TTArtisan sent over the lens, they also surprised me with their own branded 6-stop ND filter. Now, it does the job and I didn't notice any significant color shifts, but it does have one of those cheap feeling aluminium rings, unlike the B&W filters that I normally use. But what I really wanted to talk about here was just how much fun it is to work with wide-angle lenses and filters and just sort of play with the way that the world feels. So I really enjoyed being able to create images with motion blur in them, which honestly I haven't done for a while. I've got a couple of examples of this in the slideshow coming up, so please do stick around for that. Now, if you're getting a lens this wide, honestly, I recommend getting an ND filter or two just to play with them and learn to use them. This one does the job, and you don't really need the super expensive ones for a lens like this. You can save those for lenses like the XF8 to 16mm f2.8. Now, on APS-C, 10mm is an incredibly wide focal length, and the perspective distortion is quite wild. Typically, I work with a zoom lens when I'm working this wide, so I can have, a choice of how much perspective distortion that I want in my images. It took a couple of outings with this lens to just get used to the fact that I was stuck with this way of seeing, but once I did, I started experimenting with photographing objects that I would normally shoot with a much longer lens, just to see how they'd render, and honestly, it's a lot of fun. On top of that, this lens doesn't really scream wide angle and professional to the uninitiated, so it can be a great street photography lens. People don't try to avoid it while you're shooting, and they can inadvertently place themselves perfectly in your frame without even knowing it, and that's super useful in a place like Seoul, where people are hyper aware of cameras in their presence. So, 7Artisans have created a reasonably priced, well-built, and fairly sharp offering for Fujifilm X shooters. It does miss focus from time to time, but hopefully we'll see some further improvement there. It can also be a little bit soft, especially in the corners and when using it wide open, but stopping down fixes that. There's also a little chromatic aberration, but nothing that can't be corrected for. So, overall, it's a decent offering. There are no glaring issues that would stop me recommending it in and of itself. However, there is, of course, the competition. Now, the zooms from Fujifilm, Tamron, and Sigma are far more versatile offerings with better image quality, but even the cheapest of those is 3 times the price of this lens. Now, Laowa's 9mm f2.80D is also a little better optically and has almost no distortion at all, but again, it's quite a bit more expensive. Now, another interesting offering will be the upcoming Viltrox 9mm f2.8, and we'll need to wait and see how that compares. So definitely do your homework and decide what's important to you before choosing your lens. And in that regard, I hope that this review has given you the tools to compare this lens with some others that you might be comparing for your own use. Or at the very least, I hope you've enjoyed it. If you do decide to purchase this lens for yourself, please do use the link below as it helps to support the channel. But if this lens is not for you, I hope that the slideshow will be. Enjoy that, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.